There is one composition technique that we haven't discussed in this course yet. Its name is high-order components, and those can break even the most experienced developers. Before the hooks, this pattern was very popular, so if you're lucky enough to work in an old code base, you will see them everywhere. These days, it's probably not a good idea to introduce them into new code base, but understanding what they are and how they work might still be useful. Welcome to the Advanced React course, episode 7. As I said, we are looking into higher-order components today. What they are, how they work, and what we can do with the help that hooks still can't. Like, for example, how to enhance callbacks, React lifecycle methods, or intercept and enhance DOM events. This pattern is not that easy to understand by just watching a video, so make sure to check out the code examples in the description. Let's start from the beginning. What is a high-order component? The definition in React docs states that it's an advanced technique for reusing component logic that is used for cross-cutting concerns. In English, it's a function that accepts a component as one of its arguments, executes some logic, and then returns another component that renders the component from the argument, like this. The most important thing here is the return part. It returns a completely new component that renders the component from the argument. When we want to use it, we would just wrap a component in this function and then render it as usual. The simplest use case for this is to inject additional props into components. For example, if we pretend that context doesn't exist, we can implement a high-order component that injects a theme prop into other components. We would have a function that will accept any component. Inside, we will access that theme value from somewhere like local storage. Then we would return a new component. This component will render the component we passed as argument. And in addition, we'll also pass our theme value there. Now any component wrapped in this function will have access to that theme prop. These days, of course, hooks took over completely. And instead of all of this, we would probably just have a use theme hook that we would use in our button directly. There are, however, still a few use cases where higher-order components can implement something more elegantly than hooks. First of them is enhancing callbacks with some logic. Imagine, for example, you want to implement comprehensive analytics throughout the entire app. You want to fire events on every click of every button drop-down and link everywhere. With hooks, we would have to trace all of our buttons in code, find what is attached to the click event, and modify every callback where we want to send our analytics. For one or two events, that's fine, but for a larger app, I would want to simplify that. In theory, I can just use the login inside the button itself, of course, but that's not the best pattern from separation of concern point of view. Not to mention that I would want to send some data with that event. Where would that come from? From props? Even worse for separation of concerns. And if I want to reuse this logic in another component, I would have to replicate this over and over. What I want, ideally, is to encapsulate this logic when something triggered on click callback, send some events, and then just reuse it in any component I want without changing the code of those components in any way. This is where higher-order components shine. I can create with login on click function that will accept a component as an argument, return another component, handle its on-click callback, send the analytics data to wherever I want it to go, and trigger the original on-click coming from props of the returned component. Then I can use this function on any component and still use its on-click event as if it's not wrapped in anything. Our feature code won't even notice that we have analytics now, but when I click the button, the event will be sent. We also can easily extend it with more data. In real life, we'd probably want to send some unique identifier for different components. For example, we can pass that data as a second argument of the function, and then use it inside the callback. That way, when we wrap our button in it, we will also pass a text to the higher order component that this is a button. Again, the rest of the code won't even notice. If we want to go even further, we can even identify different buttons rendered in different parts of the app. For that, we can pass our location as a prop. Then extract that prop here and pass the rest of them back. Now we can just render different buttons with different props where they need to be, and analytics will just magically work. Tracing that data flow always gives me a headache, so don't be surprised that it might take a few passes to fully understand it. And don't hesitate to check out the code examples in the description. Other than callbacks, we can do the same magic trick for React lifecycle methods. For example, we can implement a higher order component that sends events when it's mounted, or even on re-render. After that, you can track mounting and re-renders for any component you wish by just wrapping them in that function. Another use case, intercepting DOM events. Imagine you implementing global keyboard shortcuts for your app. It's probably going to be an event listener attached to a window, like this. Also, you want to block those shortcuts in different parts of your app, like dropdowns or modal dialogues. They will have their own keyboard interactions that will interfere with the global shortcuts. One way to do that would be to manually add event stop propagation to all of those components. Or you can just move that logic into higher order component, and voila, any component that needs to block global shortcuts can be just wrapped in this higher order component without the need to manually do anything. Other than those use cases, pretty much everything else that we used to do with higher order components is now replaced by hooks. Hope you will never have to write those components in your life, but if you do, you now know how to do that and why. In the next video, we will talk again about performance of our apps and how to improve it or destroy it with React context. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it.